there's actually little use in comparing in comparing it to somewhere with today's values, because the objective, what we need to include, would change, and we just want to get rid of these dependencies with that approach, and hence enable long-term flow-based capacity calculation. And one good side effect of that will be that today the ENI approach we use, so the extended LTA inclusion, basically means that we send, besides the flow-based domain, also bilateral exchange restrictions to RStack. So with this alpha factor, this describes the share of what of both has been used. We send both capacities to RStack, and hence this might cause performance issues there, because basically two domains are sent. And with the change we also enable further project, other aspects to be realized, because we somehow decongest the tight resources in RStack with that approach as well. We already introduced this intention, I think was it the last course CG in May? Probably there was some in between.
It was the last,
It was the last one, okay. But then you raised the question, to perform an analysis on the alpha factor. So how, to get a hint on how often actually the long-term capacity calculations are used in the day-ahead time frame, and we just put this data down for the first part or first 9 months of this year. Just beware that an alpha factor of 0 would mean that only the LTA domain would have been used, and factor 1 means that only the flow-based domain approach has been, or flow-based domain has been used in capacity allocation. A value between 0 and 1, so meaning like 50%, doesn't mean 50% of the capacities. Just means that it's somewhere in between what has been allocated. So that means that, taken from this graph that is shown there, you can say, okay, then in 50% of the time, no LTAs have been used in an allocation in RStack anyway. And in the rest of the time, they somehow provided some capacities, but we don't know what was the exact value.
It's not.
I can understand it, because you say no sustained occurrence of alpha factor of 0, which would constitute a situation in which the LTA offer higher level of cross-donor capacity was important. But as soon as we have less than 1, even 0.99, it means that the flow-based domain cannot offer the required capacity in market dimension.
It means that to some extent the LTA domain is used as well.
Yeah, it means that
but
people use the LTA.
Yeah, market wants to use the LTA. Yeah,
at 0.99, you have a lower everything that's unchanged. You would have lower capacity for the market. Yeah. So I think that saying it like this is a bit misleading, because it's we haven't found any 0, but maybe the market doesn't need the LTA in all the direction, but it needs the LTA in the direction where actually the flow-based provides.
It needs. I would refrain from saying it needs the LTA in terms of full LTA, because we don't know about that by the factor, but somehow the edge, when like Pope would draw this multidimensional domain of LTAs and the flow-based domain, it is a point that is not inside the flow-based domain only, but somewhere in between. But we don't know. We wouldn't know how much capacities would actually have been there when only the flow-based.
No, we wouldn't know, but we know that it's not that one.
Yeah.
The market wants.
Yeah. There was another hand raised. Same question.
No, that's it.
I think it's also important. Yeah, you do the number of hours but if you look at the number to target specific hours, then you will see that it's a different picture. So like on the wrong side, when the market actually needs it, the alpha factor tends to be very rare nowadays. It's at 1 to be about considering that.
Yeah, I think it's the opposite conclusion. It means that in half of the time the good need that.
And on that, I will
It uses the LTA, right?
probably way more than that. So that's the framework where you said.
Okay, but that's a fair input that you see indeed that Euphemia for the welfare optimization is using half of the time some portion of the LTA domain. It doesn't say here how much additional net position change or welfare change creates, but it's part of the game. Fair remark.
Maybe the portion becomes a bit more clear when we go to the next slide, because that's an analysis that ESA actually made and to check, yeah, from the historical, or comparing the historical runs with the cross-zonal capacities that were provided, what was the share of social economic welfare provided by the LTA, and what was the share that was provided by the natural or by the flow-based domain. Obviously we are a bit below 70%, and I think we don't want to discuss how this analysis by ESA had actually been made, but yeah, at least we feel supported by ESA and the NRAs, seeing that picture, that most of the social economic welfare is actually provided by the flow-based domain itself, and only a very, very small share. Of course, if it's there, Euphemia can use it for social welfare optimization, and there has to be a surplus, otherwise the alpha factor would always be focusing on the flow-based domain only. But the share of socio-economic wealth or economic surplus provided by the LTAs is very little compared to what we have.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment on a previous slide, so on the alpha factor. So yes, 50% of the time. So there is a use of LTA inclusion. So which means if we remove it, there will be a strong impact for the market. So how kind of analysis is then taken into account in the decision to remove the LTA inclusion? Because if we reflect to that, it's a signal not to remove it.
There are two elements to this discussion. One element is the assumption that the level of LTAs would remain the same once we go live with LTCC, and it will not be the case. You will not have the same level of LTAs. We all know that, like today, the 4.9 gigawatt on Germany, Austria, which is kind of the biggest dimension in the LTA domain, it will not be there anymore. So when we are comparing scenarios, we should be comparing it with the right counterfactual, and that's not today's situation. If I push a bit this thought experiment of what would happen if we keep LTA inclusion and do the LTCCs based on the flow-based domain operational security, my expectation is that we try to mimic what's possible to get out of the flow-based domain in the ahead. So it would, at best, if we would be kind of less conservative in the methodology, your point on the different timestamps emerging, if at best we would get the same size of flow-based domain that we have in the ahead in long term, meaning that there is no topping up anymore coming from the LTA. That is my anticipation of what would then come out of the LTCC capacity calculation. You may have a different perception around that, but that for me is important to acknowledge that the counterfactual will change. Secondly, there is then the debate on what is the necessary level of personal capacities that need to be made available for a functioning market. And we believe that it's not the role of the LTA inclusion to fill in this need, that there is a regulatory framework around it. We all know it with the 70%, with its imperfections, inconsistencies. The legal framework is what it is, but it's there that the needs and the ambitions are described. And so fundamentally, we see that these are the two elements for us in the debate where we discuss what is the impact of removal of LTA inclusion / what is the need that it is trying to fulfill. Maybe with this, I've opened a bit of floor to reactions.
Maybe just before a quick remark, since we mentioned the counterfactuals, I'd like to maybe comment quickly on the following slide with the chart on the ENTSO report. Just also to be clear, so for me, when I read this chart, what I see is the first bucket on the left, LTA only, would represent a case where we essentially have no PTDF whatsoever in the whole year. So it would be a DFP mode completely for the entire year. And indeed, it showed that the value completely collapses, which then means that the work that you do on providing PTDFs has insane value. And this is what we can see here. But so for me, it doesn't necessarily tell us what would be the delta where had we not any LTA in the domain. So somehow we look at the historical run, the green bar, which would be PTDF plus LTA. It would be actually useful as a better counterfactual than LTA only to have PTDF only and then see what would be the delta in the economic surplus that's been achieved there. So that's a bit really looking at what was the impact in the past, the impact in the future. I agree, it can be, this is a bit what we had to present in the following slide actually, but yeah.
I mean, maybe two insights on the graphs, starting with this one. So what is shown in the second bar from the left is the natural run, right? So with virtual margins in the day-ahead time frame, like the AMR, to reach the 70%, this bar would be slightly above. And you can see that with the 70%, which we are obviously objecting for in the close future, on the right-hand side, we are even above the historical run, which includes the LTA. So that's the figures I think you have to compare. I think one remark I want to make, because someone said in the question, I think on the slide before, that this graph shows that there's a significant influence. The alpha factor doesn't say anything about significance or what amount of the LTA share has been used then, right? So we see that there is an influence that I can agree upon. There is hours where LTAs are used, but if the capacities would collapse without LTA inclusion, that cannot be drawn from that. And if there's a significant socioeconomic surplus from this LTA inclusion based on that graph, I would say no, based on the natural run and with virtual margins included, probably even less.
Can't you just show us the version that actually we run on the long-term calculation? We have a one which is without the LTA. So, but that one was a congestion ones. You can also compute the welfare, because you have the same thing. To compute the welfare, we need to have the bit and the optimization. So we could print it.
Yeah, and then the numbers are on the table, and then my question is, what type of criteria are used in the discussion for decision making?
Well, you're saying that, well, removing the rule means a change in total welfare. So you're making things, it's an extra degree of freedom that you're removing. So you expect that the welfare is going to be removed. So, but here we have only the first day, we have one way around.
And that's where we need to come back to what's the right counterfactual, because all of the simulations that we have been showing in the morning are based on the assumption that operational security will not be assessed during the long-term capacity calculation. So it actually mean doing the LTCP in not with the amendment put forward. It would mean doing it with starting with a 20% flow-based domain and then reducing it during the validation step.
It's just on that thing where you've got different configuration.
But we cannot take the same long-term capacity domain as input for such a comparison, because we would be in a different scenario. It would be another smaller long-term domain.
Except that if you assume that the domain in the market direction actually is a different dimension. I'm just saying you've got something which is showing what is the impact of assumptions. I'm just saying that you are not computing some LCA on the so that is you can you've done the computation as a computation. So you just remove that part that we know what is the true impact of it, because here we're saying, oh, if I give a certain domain which is very small, which is communication, then this is my social welfare for whatever, and we have a big gap to the current situation. If I'm starting from the current situation and I just remove the NTA, are we talking about using 1%, 5%, 10% of the welfare? Just on this, because it's not a bigger work, isn't it? So
They are asking to give the way the gentleman was saying. You need to weigh the X% by how much the X% is worth.
I mean, these calculations, to be frank, have been made by ENTSO, right? So this is not our computations, but the pure flow-based domain for the day-ahead time frame, so without LTAs, will approach in the long term, in a world where there is no derogations and no actions planned any longer, which we are approaching soon, hopefully, will approach the blue bar on the right-hand side without LTAs.
The partner one.
The purple. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is the other
Yeah.
thing, because I
So-
think you will done some calculations. If you remove the LTA, apart from Austria, doesn't have a huge impact. That's some impact, but coming from Austria.
And I get your question. I'll try to re-answer it in a different way. This would be looking back at the past with a world of uncoordinated long-term capacity calculation. If we look at the future of what would then be the result in a world of coordinated long-term capacity calculation, and this is then maybe the hard message to swallow, then yes, it would be smaller LTAs coming out, and then it would indeed have some welfare effect on the head. If you keep this setup with LTA inclusion of racial security, by transitioning from uncoordinated to coordinated LTCC, you would have this effect on social welfare in the head. How big it is, well, we cannot just say like that. And it would have an effect of lower hedging opportunities compared to today. And that's what we were then given as requests. I think both from the market party side, with all of the historical simulations and discussions that were had around long-term flow-based, etc., that the market was seeing a too big impact on the possibility to hedge. And so the capacities, the long-term flow-based domain was seen as, or is seen as a stabilizing factor. And also coming from the regulatory side, like proposed measures to increase the flow-based domain. So that is then again the starting point that we are in.
And what I want to add is that, okay, it might be that today, guaranteeing the LTA doesn't have a huge impact, but it's an insurance as well. We are saying that if We do the capacity, we coordinate the long-term capacity calculation, and we keep the LTA. We guarantee 1,000. Tomorrow we be able to guarantee only and with the proposed method, you say maybe I'm able to give 1,200 in the long term, but I don't guarantee anything in the end because we don't believe the 70% because the derogations, not derogations, you can discover at the end that it's being violated. So the market will always take a risk premium in saying that maybe tomorrow we will have zero capacity.
Yeah, but that is addressed in our approach.
Sorry?
That is addressed in our approach. Is addressed in our approach that we don't provide zero capacities.
Yeah, but the market
maybe-
doesn't believe it because they see the IBAs. We see that the 20% is almost never violated. The 70%, it's okay when it can. That's the.
Yeah, Zoran, do you want to intervene here?
Yes, hello and thank you. I must say it's hard for me to understand each and every person because it's a physical meeting and sometimes I can barely understand what has been talked about. But I'll try to guess partially being a bit in the topic. I would sorry if I repeat something which has already been said. I would support Philip's and Steve's messages. Also to maybe underline that LTA inclusion as a mean to get to have some more capacity was not the main purpose of the LTA inclusion. It was to ensure the financial compensation for the TSOs, and by that the TSOs bought, unfortunately, the strong relation of security from the long-term capacities on the day-ahead market. And also in the previous years in CWE, maybe in early score, the LTA inclusion had quite some influence on the capacities. Now we see that it's less and less, which also makes sense to my mind. And finally, if we get coordinated long-term flow-based capacity calculation, even with the benchmark, which is a transitional solution, and if we have better respecting the 20% min run in this proposal, I would say that such an influence is even smaller. Finally, I took out something from Ignacio's diagrams. I'm not sure if you discussed this also because it was not intelligible, but I guess that you wanted to compare the values of without LTA inclusion with LTA inclusion, and this is if I understood well, the year 2024 with LTA inclusion on the left and without LTA inclusion on the right. These values are almost the same. So that's what I got from our report. So more and more through time we have less influence of LTA inclusion, especially for the general level of capacity allocated, and especially the economic surplus. So knowing the importance of getting rid of LTA inclusion to unleash the development in the long term, I think it's very good direction from the TSOs in this moment.
Just briefly, if I may. The problem is in distribution of this social welfare and the surplus. Who will get this surplus, TSOs or market participants? And what to do with this surplus in order to avoid further congestions? In different bids, in different bidding zone reviews, in building new building investments, in both sides, interconnectors, generation facilities to be more flexible. What are the proposals? What to do when we get better efficiency of the usage of the existing capacities?
Well, the economic surplus is either consumer surplus or producer surplus. So, exactly.
Both sides will get surplus.
Yeah. Okay, and that is distributed across the region, of course. So,
in simple sentence, total simple one, when somebody quit smoking, what he will do with the extra money?
It's longer.
But again, it's hard to hear, but I understand. Yeah, if we had the coordinated long-term capacity calculation, that means, first of all, there will be no politically agreed peaks of capacities across Europe. And I guess the economic surplus was collected mainly there on these borders, or extra surplus, I would say. Although long-term congestion income was spread across the whole region, even if it's, let's say, bought on Germany-Austria border, it's to the benefit of all TSOs in the congested region. So this is really an important aspect. So I would see no problem if extra surplus goes somewhere, or it is socialized in a better way, if it was in general collected by, let's say, politically agreed high NTCs on the long term. If we don't include such LTA, if we don't have such a LTA inclusion based on this agreed NTCs, I can just think that the spread of the surplus is more even and closer to physical reality.
Thanks for your contribution, Zoran. We should maybe
The Austrian fact that German Austria is divided by 4. When exactly, I mean, it's for next year, it's already finalized, or it's for future?
this is part of the benchmark definition for the coordinated LTCC. So if it is approved by the regulators, this will be used for the 2026 November one, for the 2027 yearly auction. So next year is still with uncoordinated long-term auctions.
But if the amendment is not approved, does that mean that the standard 0.7 allocation is based on adding of the capacity of the long term, or it's completely
Anyhow, this has already been confirmed by the respective regulators. The 4.9 gigawatt will not be used anymore when LTCC goes live.
If STCC doesn't go live, what happens? Is keep the 4.9, or we do directly or divide by 2?
We are not taking a scenario where it not goes live. We are implementing it. We are implementing it with the improvement, and then it's a matter of how the approval of the improvement is taking place. So if that's all I can say about that. We need to let the democratic processes play.
German politicians really don't like it.
From our side, there's no plan B. Yeah. So. Okay, Philip.
Yeah. I think that was Philip.
Yeah, but did we already cover most of it, or? No, okay. Yeah, okay.
So thank you very much on behalf of market participants. First of all, thank you very much for the discussion. It's quite extended from the agenda, so we really appreciate the fact that we can ask questions and we can discuss with you as well. Just to give a bit of context, I'm not going to present it necessarily. I will leave it to experts as well. But yeah, we've been discussing on behalf on the side of market participants the LTA inclusion removal, which is something that we may have different views on how it may be working, or like maybe the rationale behind it as well. So the idea right now with the 2 slides that will be presented is like also to understand your views and to present also like data that we've been collecting as well. So just to give that, we also gave a paper, let's say, where we try to explain why we did not have that clarity. So we sent a paper on the 1st of July 2025 as well on this point. So right now is to discuss also that what was in that paper as well. So I'll leave Arnaud and Francesco to present it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Zeli. So indeed, this is an extract basically from the notes that we wrote in reaction to the last CG, where the question of LTA inclusion was mentioned. So some of the figures were presented. We felt like we wanted to go and understand a bit more exactly what that would mean in terms of both past impact and future impact. So thank you for already reacting to this with the couple slides previously with the alpha factor and so on, and for letting us basically explain also a bit more what we did. So this was just an attempt at bringing a bit our 2 cents in a discussion of what was the past impact and the future. But I will let maybe Francesco present the slides since he performed the charts and the analysis.
Thank you. So yeah, we were basically, we did this paper to react a bit on the figures that were presented during the last core CG. Now, a lot of the things that we put here have been already discussed quite extensively, especially the alpha factor. But for us, it was important to stress the fact that an alpha factor below 1 means that it's socially optimal to have this LTA inside inside Stack. So again, the impact and the exact amount of capacity might be questionable, but it's sure that it's socially optimal to have the LTA when the alpha factor is less than 1. And we saw from also the figures before that this situation where the alpha factor is below 1 occurs around 50% of the hours in 2024. Again, to react on the Acer study that was mentioned before, Arnaud also made the comment. This economic surplus of that was reported for the LTA was referred in a situation where the FP is applied in all the timestamps, which is not realistic. So obviously the PTDF helps a lot. The role of the LTA is not there to provide capacity, but it's more a way for market participants to have a floor, a guaranteed floor that is certain and it will not go away with IVAs or other validation measures. Then the second part of the study was to react on the figures regarding the impact of removing the LTA inclusion on the capacity that were provided to the market. So what TSO showed in the last core CG was basically an assessment of how the max net export position of the countries change if we include the LTA or not. They were presenting the mean and the lowest value. It's a way to show it for sure, but we believe that it's a bit more complete if we look at the distribution. So how the two distribution change when we consider or not consider the LTA inside the domain. The impact, you see it in the charts on the right. So on the min max next, the impact is visible, especially for Austria, which is obvious, and it takes into consideration a value that will not be considered further in the benchmark, and we agree on that. But we also believe that looking at the maximum bilateral exchange is also important. And there you see also impacts on borders that are not influenced by the political agreement. So in the two charts below, you see the impact that removing the LTA has on Belgium, Netherlands, and France, Germany. We can argue maybe it's not a lot, but there is an impact that was not shown in the previous slides from the TSOs. Now, this study was conducted on the current situation, so taking the 2024 domain and applying or including or not including the LTA domain. We also understood that this needs to be assessed in the context of 70% MIRAM. So we tried, maybe we can go to if there are no questions on this slide, maybe we can jump to the next. Thank you. So in this context, we try to basically have a view of what is the impact of including the LTA domain in a domain which is already impacted by the 70% MIRAM. So what we did, you can see it in the assumption on the left. We rescaled the 2024 domain according to 70% MIRAM. We halved the values for the Austria. And we assumed the IVA levels constant to 2024, which is again an optimistic assumption because it doesn't, we assume them constant in absolute values. While we know that when MIRAM increases, IVA levels are also supposed to increase. But we took the 2024 level as they were. So the methodology is a bit like this. We took the domain, we rescaled it, we applied the IVAs, and then we extracted extreme position, both for the net position and the bilateral exchanges. For the 70% domain only, and the 70% domain rescaled, and the LTA, considering 50% of the values in Germany, Austria. And what we see again is that there is an impact of even when the domain is rescaled to 70%. On the chart on the right shows the impact on France, Germany, and the distributions of the values for Germany, France, and Germany, Netherlands. Again, the impact is minimal, but we are considering a perfect scenario where 70% is fully achieved, where IVA levels are also low, and still we can see an impact of having the LTA in the domain. That's it for me. I don't know if you have any reaction, comments, questions.
Thank you, Francesco.
Just a small remark that you know that the Dutch capacities are also hard-coded in the Dutch network code, so they are critical as well.
And those will not be considered in the benchmark?
No, they will disappear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, they will disappear again with these changes. These
These codes, these values will disappear from the Dutch network code. Yeah.
And are there also ones in the Dutch?
No, I don't know. I only know the Dutch situation.
The only two political agreements existing right now are the Germany, Austria, and Dutch.
Dutch borders, yeah.
All the Dutch borders.
Dutch borders, yeah. Not to Norway and not to
the core
the core borders. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I wasn't aware.
If I may, I mean, just thinking about what this actually tells us, and if you compute max-bax restrictions, it is under the assumption that there is no exchanges between the other zones. So all other zones are set to 0. So that means if you compute the max-bax restriction for the LTA, you will end up with the LTA always. And
not if the flow base allows for more.
Not if the flow base allows for more, okay. But you will the LTAs then serve as a minimum cap there. So, but that doesn't tell you about if in the flow-based domain the same exchange of the amount of the LTAs would be possible depending on the other bidding zones net positions. So what you're basically circumventing there is flow-based at all. Because you're postulating with the assumption you make that you want to have the LTA levels guaranteed no matter what the other zones do. But flow-based actually means that we optimize all zones together. So, and if we want to go on one zone, so on this exchange, for example, you market participants say, okay, we want the bids say we want to have as much capacity as possible for the Dutch Netherlands border. Even in this example, this can be above the max-bax restrictions. What you don't have is this max-bax restriction cap that the LTAs provide into that, but still in the market coupling or in the allocation, a higher exchange on that border could be possible with the flow-based domain only, and that could be even above the LTAs depending on the 70%, because it might be that other zones net positions just decongest those good elements. So, and I think when doing this analysis, which is correct, by the way, to my understanding, but you should have this, take this into account, because you basically want to circumvent the flow-based approach and say, okay, we want an NTC of the LTAs for that border. And that's, I think, discussions that have been made years ago, not questioning if it's better or worse, but it's basically the same discussion then. Yeah.
But so, I mean, today what is published as max-bex is PTBF plus LTA mix on the publication tool. And so we can agree that these are theoretical maximum positions, that this is probably not a realistic market outcome in a way, but it is a proxy to see on the capacity calculation side, not on the allocation, but on calculation, what is the gap with the existing approach. So I agree that on the allocation, it will not necessarily be a realized impact, but on the calculation, this is the impact that we see when we do the optimization.
So the bilateral exchanges for one border can be above the max-bex restriction that are computed on the publication tool. So because the max-bex restriction is just maximizing the exchange between those two zones, ignoring different net positions of the other ones, and min-max net position is optimizing the net position of one zone by having all the others within their limits, but realized. So, and then you're just computing one specific vertex of exchanges where no exchange between other zones, and these two, that's the max-bex restriction. But in flow-based, different allocations would be possible in the end. That could be that's one point, but it could be more between Netherlands and Belgium in that example, if maybe there is also an export from France at the same time.
And here you're talking about market results, while these are not market results. So in terms of pure characterization of the domain, we just wanted to show that.
Yeah, you cut these parts out where we have like this minimum floor. Yeah.
Now, just to clarify also that, I mean, we agree with the idea that LTA is not just here to guarantee a floor. I mean, that's the effect that it has today. It's not maybe its initial purpose, and we're not necessarily advocating for keeping status quo, but it's more that fundamental question of how do we ensure sufficient levels of capacity in the market. LTA historically has been able, in what we've seen before, through the alpha factor to help achieve more welfare and so on. We just see that the 70% is still maybe somewhat far away to be fully realized. And so we just wanted to feed in discussion the impact that removing LTA would have in those capacity levels on the market.
I think that's a good way of putting it, that by removing it, the discussions are clean on both long-term and short-term markets. Clean in the sense that long-term we talk about euros and hedging, and the trade-off that we discussed before the morning, and clean in the shorter markets, because then we have an undistorted view on where we are with respect to the implementation of the 70% and what is the role of the 20% minimum that we have on top of that in the methodology. But at least then we have no kind of disturbing layer in these discussions on either side.
We always end up at the layer of the security of supply. Now all the risk is being put from TSOs only to market participants. How to provide all these risks to be fulfilled only under their heads.
It's not us, we are not deciding upon the methodologies and the regulatory framework.
Yeah.
So I think we have just to point that out, that we have all of these rules with respect to minimum capacities and everything that is around it. We have the regulators that will have to approve or not the methodology. So this is all part of the balance of powers here.
We miss insurance companies together with us. TSOs were kind of insurance company for us. They insured corridors from long horizon perspective up to their heads resolution. And now we have been cut from that long-term perspective and being put in the river of only their head. day-ahead survival. This is a huge challenge for us.
Still, there are minimum capacity requirements. And this is the second part of Philip's presentation with respect to how we are.
You know what market theory says? When you are in the need for buying any service or product or goods, you give extra bid. And it might result in getting much higher bids on a day-ahead level, resulting much more volatile price in a day-ahead market. Because we can't distribute the risk before the day-ahead market. Very difficult topic, and especially in fundamental trading. And fundamental trading has been moved from the long horizon, and all the risks have been smashed in a day-ahead horizon. And that can create a lot of problems, even for TSOs, not only for market participants. But let's see what the future can bring.
What do you think?
Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the LTA inclusion itself today is done in Euphemia with the extended LTA inclusion approach. So the ELI approach, where both core flow-based domains and LTA domain are provided to ESTA and Euphemia, and then via this alpha factor, it's decided between them. So I think when now we have this removal of LTA inclusion, there's like when we look at the objectives, 3 things to target. So what has been highlighted before by you is like what is with minimum capacities or sustainable capacities, because we take something from the regular process, we remove the LTAs, and they are obviously there. So what happens in the happy flow? Then today, we make use of the extended LTA approach, so the ELI approach and the LTAs for the default flow-based parameters. Whilst the name default flow-based parameter suggests that it's flow-based parameters, it's ATCs in the end, so it's the LTAs that are behind that. And with ELI in place, we can just send an empty flow-based domain with the LTAs, the LTA domain, and have this as default flow-based parameters. With the LTA removal, this won't be possible anymore. Both the LTAs do not exist anymore. They are different values, and the ELI approach will not exist anymore. So we will have a solution for that. And today, the ATCs for the general options are based on the long-term capacities as well. And yeah, we have developed for the amendment a proposal for all of these 3 objectives. And yeah, starting with the happy flow on the next slide. Yeah, it's just the standard process of the capacity calculation. So if we compute the flow-based domain as every day, you want to have something that replaces the LTAs. That's basically this aspect. You know? So, and today, as you highlighted, or even show with your analysis, the LTAs serve as a kind of backstop for the flow-based, because this LTA inclusion is applied after the validation. So even if the TSO would go below 20% RAM or to 0 RAM, still some capacities would be there because the long-term capacities are there, and that's something that we would agree. So that, yeah, similar as we have the validation fallback today, where we agreed to not go below 20%, but use this value as well as a value. We also think that, yeah, ensuring some minimum cross-zonal capacities in this flow that replaces the LTAs would be valuable. And that's where we came up with this 20% approach, which has been proven to work sustainably in all processes so far. It has always been this 20%, but there is a change, a fundamental change. Today, the 20% is applied in terms of limiting the individual validation reductions. So if a TSO applies a individual validation reduction, we have something like a business rule to not go below 20%. This is the intermediate flow-based computation. That means physical transmission rights, so long-term nomination, which will remain in place for two borders in core, will be applied afterwards. So if in the extreme case, just hanging the devil to the wall, some of these long-term nomination would consume more than 20% RAM, we would end up with 0 RAM in the day-ahead time frame. And that would, if there's one connect with 0 RAM, we would block all trades that congest this connect further. And that's obviously not what we as TSOs want to do. And that's why we provide this 20% proposal. That means in the methodology, even after the long-term nominations, we will ensure a minimum RAM per connect of 20%. So that means today we have the 20% for core. In the future case, it will be 20% for core day ahead, even after long-term nominations. Still, TSOs have the right to validate, and there might be exceptional grid situations to go below those 20%. It would be something similar like the LTA curtailment that would be possible today, and we don't expect this to happen often. But yeah, we cannot write a method where it prohibited to go below that. But the solution we now provide is that once this would happen, a market message would be sent out that this 20% floor cannot be respected, and a specific analysis will be performed why actually this was needed, not just somewhere hidden in the quarterly report or something more prominent. But on the regular basis, you could expect those 20% to be available for core day ahead. That's not to be confused with the 70%, which is margin available for cross-zonal trade. That's also including exchanges with other zones. So we could have exchanges with Switzerland or or Italy North or something today that has also an impact. 20% will be for core exchanges. So there cannot be an empty domain on a regular basis or domain with RAM below this 20%, even with that.
Maybe a quick question on this, on the 20%. So I was also seeing in the latest report from Acer that the minimum percentage of Fmax that we have seen over, I think it was the past year and probably even more, showed that we were already somehow above the 20% floor in most situations. Now, granted, that includes the exchanges with the non-core zones and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a view on if we remove that component, how often do we have breached that 20% historically? And then therefore, how many hours does that really impact the market? Have
you mean by today?
Sorry?
Do you mean today?
Yeah, if there's been any assessment on, so how many hours would that truly be?
I'm not sure if there's honestly, I'm not sure if there's an assessment by TSOs if they would have applied. We would have to ask all TSOs if they would have applied a reduction below 20% if this rule didn't exist. In the future, I mean, to provide some insight there, because we had some accidental run with the AHC run where this was not respected. And then indeed that happens to what I explained before. Then you have like 5 megawatts of RAM and then capacities really collapse without LTA. But this is included in the methodology to have this floor as well, even after long-term nominations, because they could really cause a significant drop of capacity otherwise.
I guess long-term nomination nowadays, it concerns certain zones only, FUAF and the non-core exchanges. It also doesn't impact every country in the same way. And I don't know, it would be useful, I think, for the discussion to see for different countries, how often do they breach the 20% excluding the non-core exchanges, and therefore see for which country it becomes the more impactful measure.
I mean,
Later in the afternoon, we will have Nico joining from Craig with a topic on the derogations. I know that he makes this type of statistics, maybe even publishes them. So we could ask if there is some public available information from statistics that he made that we could link in the minutes of the meeting.
So maybe one addition to that, it will not be only the respective country that is influenced by those models that would come out of the long-term nominations. If there is, staying with this example, a connect somewhere in Hungary that is influenced by long-term nominations, and based on that render to a RAM of 0, all core exchanges have a non-zero PTDF on that connect, so it will be limiting all, even with a small PTDF one, and that's why we really try to avoid such situations.
Well, worrying is on idea on exception. And why it's triggered because it is a local security issue, it might even be on some agreement we don't even see. Then also the dynamic stability criteria, the position limits, those ones, do foresee some evolution. Because we know that some countries, we've got in common before, because you can imagine that other countries we need to have minimum stable generation online. In this framework, the only way to do it is by changing the line, or trying to guess which line to change, a bit like what RT was doing 2 years ago when we started having issues with Italy. So when we think that there is an expert constraint that we're missing, if a country is to change a position, how does it do it right in this program?
You mean if a country has to change its position?
The other ones I want to keep for the category online. In the afternoon, how do we do it? From TSO perspective. I just change around, so because it's true, it's a new stability issue. So at the moment, we've got it in Italy, in France. We know that it's structural, that there are a couple of countries which have issues dealing with those enough. So, and it's an essential part of maintaining the building. How do we deal with that in this framework?
So any type of use of allocation constraint is strictly regulated in the methodology.
Yes, but physics doesn't care about methodology. Physics cares about physics. So what is
and so on this example, we had it in the past in Belgium as well. We had for years allocation constraints. And then we made investments in the grid in order to maintain and manage the voltage stability. And so that's where we were able to not put an allocation constraint in anymore. And so this type of, if there is such type of consideration, then every TSO is formally obliged to inscribe it in the methodology. There is no way of doing it differently. And if the concern is then, yeah, but it can lead to an IVA on CNEX, yeah, those IVAs are transparently published. We also have quarterly reports that make all the statistics and that make the explanations and justifications, and then it's fully regulatory oversight.
In Belgium, I'm not sure that people on the DSO are so happy with this one. There's another discussion. Because it being disconnected with the voltage issues, and it's not just a TSO issue. What the TSO can do, but the fact that there's a lot of things happening at TSO level, which is not really controlled, has to be acknowledged. So it's, if we're making a methodology which is supposed to be fit for quite a few years, we know the kind of challenge we're going to have in a few years down the line. So my point is just saying that increased solar is not going to go away. So it's, even if it's slower, but the fact that you need to have a different type of constraint. So we have put the constraint on, we got long rate on some of the constraints. When we take DC links, we get long rates. But we've got position of countries which can have massive swings. In one country which doesn't accept that is floor at 0, the other one which is not. You can suddenly take a swing between one and the other one. It keeps increasing. So at some point, you need to recognize that the system that we're having now is a bit different from the previous one.
And that's why it's regulated where needed through allocation constraints. And that's why you see that what Shane, the colleague from AirGrid, explained this morning, that they have put forward this as part of the amendment as well for their system. You mentioned the example of Poland, which has always been there. There is the example of Italy North. And all of that is transparently part of the process, requiring a justification, requiring a follow-up in terms of measures, what you do with it. And so there is, for me, there is no kind of TSOs putting things under the carpet here. It's fully part of the methodology process.
I don't think nowadays you've got position, wrong positions. So if a country suddenly is exporting candy the next hour, export an hour, is suddenly going to 0 or -2. There is no such constraint right now. But we have one country which, because of the way we treat the 0, you can have, you can tell us we just got the RT was complaining that it's got emission issues, whatever, people are just switching from the NTU, which is getting different issue. But it's the same problem in the background. The background is as soon as you start having massive changes, you can't physically adjust your system instantaneously with such a huge quantity. So you need that in the format. If you don't, how do you deal with it? Otherwise, we're missing one, and there's a set of concerns that we're missing.
Isn't that somehow respected in the block bits you provide as a generator? So
it's a physical constraint on the system because the generator is like boom at the moment, which sustains complaining about, which is what about is that generators which are not traditional, I mean, you can switch them off almost instantaneously. And switching them off instantaneously means massive position changes. You have a massive position change. And already you got that a few years ago where systems started to be unstable. But with much larger volume at play, we need these constraints at some point.
I mean, as of today, to my understanding, there is no net position ramping limit in SDAC or any. I know that this is being discussed for some zones. Personally, that's really my personal opinion, is that I mean, if we will have a future like RES dominated system, that is something that we as TSOs will have to deal with, and that's what we all are working for when doing the capacity calculation, to allow for different net positions and even changes in net positions when there is a reason to limit, like for HVDC lines or maybe even for physical zones, and then this is being respected. But on the other side, SDAC is aware of such ramping limitations because also the generators provide their bits within their limitations. So I would hope, or would assume that there's no result that cannot be reached by the system that come out of SDAC. And yeah, I mean, if there's so far, I have not seen any TSO raising concerns of.
The rest doesn't have discipline.
Maybe it's good also to is there an immediate concern then in this amendment proposal?
One thing that is important, the only way to do is to try experiments, start experiments with one, like IBA, which is what RTA is using.
Okay, but it is then directly related to this amendment that we are.
Like what are the criteria for the exceptional reduction?
Okay.
Because if you don't do it, you need. And the problem is that if the only way to do it is by playing with the RAM, it's extremely complicated. You have the risk of doing a party or which is initially they overall and they admitted that they also reduce the domain. When they first discovered that the problem is change to Italy, so they were more constrained in the lines. Because initially the lines, the constrained lines are not the problem.
I think the effect is quite simple. You somehow limit the net positions, even in the one hand side with IVA and the other side with net position constraint. I think for the CE methodology, if I'm right, there is at least for Italy North some limitations in this regard somehow included. But I'm not an expert on the methodology, but I know there is been discussions about that for Italy North.
Complicated to do, because the only instrument you have is by changing the RAM. Naturally, you will start really getting a lot of RAM, whereas actually what you want is just in the position or pushing something else. So my point is, okay, at the moment, there's really like that, but at least from the market perspective, because the risk suddenly we discover that one win as an issue, and because the tooling is not ready, he has to cut a lot.
So you're basically advocating for allocation constraints instead of IVA reductions for run sets. Yeah.
If it's justified, you should have it. You should use the correct instrument.
Indeed. But the IVAs and the situation that you were referring to was for thermal limitations.
That's some methodological issue about
that. But that's my point. I was saying that all of the pieces of the puzzle together, DSOs have the right to propose such a need in the methodology for allocation constraints and justify it. And there is also regulatory oversight over the validation reductions. And so these are, for me, the two parts in the methodology and in the game that should make sure that when these situations pop up, that it's addressed properly, that it's feasible, and that is done properly in the end in the methodology. But just to give you the feedback back, that today we are not having additional needs that we are putting around that on the table. In the methodology amendment.
See what the final report from ENTSO-E that actually means part of the.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's continue indeed. Yeah.
Or is there any questions online maybe?
No, there's no question online.
No. So this was for what we call the happy flow. So the next slide would be on the second aspect. So finding a solution for what do we do in terms of default flow-based parameters. Just as a short reminder, the LTAs are the basis for default flow-based parameters today. So basically they are the DFPs. It will be shown on the next slide later, but basically ACER invited us to investigate different approaches to DFPs, mainly saying statistical approaches. And we came up with a proposal for DFPs that defines DFPs in such a way that any market clearing point in the DFP would have been contained in X, let us call it a certain amount of percentages, maybe 95 of the historical flow-based domains. So the analogy in the single dimension or NTC would be that we just like 95% and 95% quantile of the historical NTC. So if you say 100 megawatts is the historical NTC, then 95 would be contained with this respective quantile. Obviously, in the n-dimensional flow-based domain and for different and multiple hours, that is not that easy to compute such quantiles. So yeah, we came up with a pragmatic but still statistical approach, which we call the constraint selection. And yeah, this algorithm itself is really detailed, described in the methodology proposal. But the idea is basically to collect all important connects from the past year, which have been pre-solved in more than specific amount of hours, which we call the frequency threshold, and then construct for one representative connect for each CNE. So there might be different outages for one CNE, but we want to construct one representative, collect the respective connect associated with that CNE, normalize it to have the same direction, and then in the end compute a replacement connect like a representative connect with representative TTDFs for that on average and run. And based on that, you could compute a flow-based domain that is like statistically contained in X% of the historical domains. That's, as I said, the idea behind that. We do some unboundedness checks and so on, and then in the end, that would form the future default flow-based parameters, which would hopefully be above the LTAs as today. By doing this approach, that one good aspect is that you can really do this straightforward for all constraints, even external constraints. They are pre-solved all the time. You could just include them automatically, so that will work the same way. Or the equality constraint for core, for example, is obviously pre-solved in all hours, so it will be constrained in the DFPs automatically. And we would do that as it is a significant amount of computations. Our idea would be to do this on the flow-based domains for 1 year, and then on a monthly basis, publish it on a monthly basis. So that means that you would be aware of what would be the DFPs in case of DFP application in the end. But then in that way, we would really send a flow-based domain to RStack in case of DFPs. One aspect, so it's basically the last one on the slide, is some TSO raised concern. So what happens if we have like a 1-year historical flow-based domain, use this for our statistical approach, and we are aware that now exactly for the day tomorrow, we know that some lines are out of operations and they have been in operation the last year. So maybe that changes something. So we also would provide the TSOs the right to validate this DFP domain and do some reduction in such specific cases. But generally, that would be the approach we would propose for that. And I think we fulfill. If you go to the next slide, where ASA just provided an analysis on them. ASA provided on post-zonal capacities and potential outcomes of a economic surplus in the day-ahead market for DFPs with such statistical approach. We were invited to develop such approach, and we think that with the removal of LTA inclusion and in this 4th amendment, it's a good proposal serving this request. Then, as we would read it anyways. But of course, still the aim is to minimize the occurrence of DFPs instead of having the perfect DFP approach. So that will be clear.
Maybe a quick question on that calculation. I mean, first of all, I think it looks like a much better approach to DFP than just purely the LTA. I mean, we saw the values indeed in the previous charts. So because now there's a more complex process, there's also need to publish, I guess, those extra DFP domains. I mean, do we have already sort of guideline into at which moment those will be published, how long in advance? Because I would say for us, we know that the DFP is a LTA. LTA is available year round. We can just go on the website, we see what's the value, and we can have an idea. Will these domains become treated at the same time as the LT capacity calculation, or do you have already some ideas on that?
So, I mean, we discussed internally that we would like to start publishing 3 months before we go live with the approach of the domains, but honestly, we have not discussed yet on what will be the frequency of publishing the domain. I mean, when there is a new computation every month, you would expect one domain per month, but I don't know how much lead time we would have. But I can take that with me and
transparency on those values to be available is super important.
And Zoran, do you want to?
Yeah, a short comment. A short comment. Yeah. Indeed, we discussed over some materials with the TSO colleagues the statistical approaches for different uses. One of them is default flow-based parameters here, also statistical long-term flow-based. And we then realized from both sides, I would say, that similar approaches can be used here and there. Indeed, we also checked the TSO's proposal, which is a bit different than Acer's proposals, and it seems promising to us. So we would welcome continuation in this respect. Because, as you said, it's important to get rid of the very low DFPs provided by LTA. Anyway, we are losing LTA, which is not the worst thing in this perspective. So yes, we hope that TSOs will be able to push through this their proposal.
I had another question. Will it be it's a unique DFP domain for all the MTUs, or will you have a different?
Unique, be a unique domain for all MTUs, but monthly update. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then to conclude on that aspect, the last and small thing is that the DFPs are used as shadow auction ATCs today. And of course, if there's no LTAs anymore, we cannot use that as well. And then depending on the triggering situation, different fallback would be applied. So we could use the fallback flow-based domain on the statistical assessment. If the 4CC tool fails, we cannot compute capacities. We will send DFPs, of course. And if the allocation fails, so we go to shadow auctions, then we would, based on this default flow-based domain, do an ATC extraction and use those ATCs for the fallback. I think that's the most consequent way forward. There's just one minor remark, and that's a big block on this slide, is that might be that the allocation constraints, the Polish allocation constraint, have been updated in the meantime. We would then, if SDAC works, of course, they are considered in the domain, and if SDAC fails, it works as well. But if both processes fail and we go to the shadow auctions, then we would have to adjust those ATCs that come out of the ATC extractions to respect the external or the allocation constraints in Poland. Given that it's very unlikely that both capacity calculations and SDAC fail at the same time, I think that's this conservative approach might be fine.
Okay. I think that's it for then LTA inclusion removal. And then I hand over to Sally for the rest of.
So before we do a break, let's just finish on day-ahead capacity calculation. So topic 5. So if we can present this, and then we can have a small break perhaps afterwards.
Very quickly checking, because also for intraday, Peter, what's the time that you ultimately have to leave?
Around 50 minutes after 3 o'clock or 3:30, the very latest.
Oh, okay. Then
we can switch the topics maybe and start with intraday capacity calculation.
We have the same flight, basically.
Okay. should we vote? What is the most?
I think so. My proposal for the ad would be, I mean, the feedback for the fourth amendment. We have on this slide all the changes are listed. It's the GLSK, it's a Polish allocation constraint, mainly removal of LTA. The public consultation is ongoing, so maybe it would just be the fine way forward to use the public consultation to acquire feedback on that. I'm not sure if there's any urgent topics that we need to discuss on the fourth amendment beyond the LTA inclusion removal today. There's something, I mean, any other feedback could be provided in the consultation as well.
In the sake of time, I think we can go forward.
Yeah.
And for AHC, I could at least maybe just provide a very short update. So we have, so from TSO side, we're basically ready to go live with AHC. So that wouldn't mean tomorrow because we have to change our processes, but with like a 3 months, 4 months pre-notification phase, we could switch it on. And yeah, all validation tools have been proven to run stable. I think there was a request for a fourth spike-like run. We did that in the meantime, and the results were published. But I acknowledge the request for another spike-like run. We will take that with us if there's a way of providing it.
Yeah, but actually we provide the cover month or week before we provide because we use the vast remains in our simulations.
So besides those spike-like runs, we will have an full external parallel run 1 month before go live.
Yeah, but 1 month doesn't cover 4 seasons. If you go live in April, we will have March, what we will use for the summer or for the winter 26.
And we did have an extensive alignment on that in the past 2 years, where we agreed on this spike approach with in total, 47 business days spread out. So we understand the request, but we cannot commit to it today because, for example, we cannot do this together when doing external power bottom. So we will probably get back to that request, and we will follow up as well.
Yeah, perfect.
We will take that question with us.
Then you could start the parallel run today. You say that your tools are ready.
Yeah, I take the tool. So the tools are ready, meaning we could switch the environment to running AHC. It doesn't mean that the second one could run both. So the problem with
we can pay for another computer if needed.
It's not a computer. So that would be the easy way to just use another computer. But parallel run would also mean all operators are involved. For example, it doesn't help you if we don't validate the domain.
Yeah.
And that is done by the operators, and that means parallel runs, given that we have them for intraday and for other aspects as well, that we were rather talking about extra shifts than about extra computers. And yeah, I think that's why we came up with this compromise in the end. But we will check if there is a way of adding another spike-like run or another run of some business days covering more seasons before we actually go live. I think that is something that we could offer.
But maybe you could also, based on all the reports that we have published, kind of highlight what are the remaining questions. Because we published a lot of these reports, which we hope are very useful. But we don't know what questions remain, what has been already been addressed.
But it's not a matter of questions, it's a matter of data which we put in the model. If we start in April, April 26, we look forward towards the year. So let's say on the summer 26 and something winter 26, we will use winter 24. I don't know when the last data point, but we will use domains just a of 1 to 2 years. Because the only thing that we can do for summer 26 is match June 1st 26, one of the 5 domains. June 2nd 26, one of the 5 domains, and so on. Okay.
I understand that, yeah.
Most market participants, what they are unable to see the domain from the bottom up.
Okay, I understand. We will get back to it, whether it's feasible or not.
I see that there is also a hand raised in the online. If that can be a very quick question or statement, that would be great in mind of time.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Thanks for taking the question. Actually, it was on the harmonization of GSKs, because I think, in my opinion, it's a rather fundamental parameter. And so I wanted to know what level of transparency we could expect on that in terms of impact and in terms of methods.
I mean, basically, the outcomes of the GLSK studies are like there will be the country GLSK will be the reference GLSK for all TSOs, and that will be still individual GLSKs will be allowed, but they will have to be measured against this standard GLSK and have to prove to be better. If you want to have the results of the study presented, I think the only way or the only reason that it's not on the slides is because you didn't request it. That's at least what I was told. So if you would like to have some feedback from the GLSK study in the next CG, I think that should be possible.
Just as a remark in terms of transparency, because now that Northern is flow-based, another is flow-based, but in cable different nodes from the country, they don't publish as far as I know, and I can't find the price of the cable. So we have the current metrics, but we don't have the channel pricing in the constraint. We don't have the cost of the node, and it's something that you
for the Nordics. This is for the Nordics, right?
This is for the Nordics. Nordics, no shadow price and no price for the node, because now each cable is a node, basically. So quite hard for us to replicate. In parallel, what kind of transparency do we get? Just outside?
I will have to check if we can publish the other set as well, because that's not. It could be that the shadow price of one of these AHC lines, for example, stems from limitations in the Nordics, and then we couldn't find it in our results, so to say. I checked what we can publish for the current.
Because already I can tell you that we see contour flows and it's
Yeah.
Yes, we are doing it fully. The example alone is including the market coupling simulations. Right?
Yes. So technically, this information should be there, but I'm not sure if what is constrained in the data we receive from the NEMOs. That's usually only those aspects that are related to our parts of the grid. So yeah, it might be that there's a shadow price, but it's useless. But I have to check.
That's it for day ahead then?
Yeah, the brief overview of the downside.
Exactly. So then, Thomas, let's go quickly then to intro day, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense.
To introduce myself, my name is Peter Thomas. I'm working for Amprion and I'm now convener of the intraday capacity calculation project team. And today I'm presenting the intraday topic. I think we have several topics on the agenda. Following up on the operational processes, we have some KPIs. We have the fifth amendment of the intraday methodology, the current status of the IDCCD planning, and some follow-ups of the capacity improvement study. Let's start with the operational processes. We have a new process in intraday capacity calculation, IDCCD, which provides updated capacities at 4:30 around in the morning of the business day. Of course, we are monitoring the process. I'm also creating some KPIs about it. We'll see this later on. So this is one of the big improvements of our overall internet calculation process. However, there were also some issues or challenges in the operational process. We had some fallback applications in the last months. So this means that normal process could not be performed. So there were issues for 2 full days and for 6 partial days. Together with our vendors, we are working on the stability of this process, of course. All the occurrences are also published on job. So we also know when something went wrong, and we are providing fallback capacities. So there are 2 main reasons for the stability issues. One is an IT issue. The tool itself some connectivity issues. So this is something we also need to improve on the IT side. But there are also some maybe more operational challenges. Sometimes input is missing for the process. Overall, the NTD process is quite challenging because we don't have much time to perform this process. So compared to day ahead, we have to use the same process in much less time, and this also impacts the stability in the end. But of course we are monitoring it very closely and have also some short-term measures already implemented. There was one incident directly at go live. We have some more information on the next slide. Yes. As an example for different issues that could occur during operation. So there was some input from 2 TSOs, from Mavia and from Hobbs. Normally, for this situation, we have some kind of a replacement strategy in place, which means, okay, we cannot use the intended input, but there's some fallback input that could be used. But unfortunately, for this day, also the replacement did not work, and the whole process was stuck. And as there was not much time left for operators, there was no change to have to continue with the normal capacity calculation. And there was some workarounds in place, and the solution or improvement for the tool itself has also been put in operation end of July. On the next slide, there is some KPIs about biddings and isolation. I think that is a quite huge topic of IDCC because the current situation that the bidding zone is not able to import and export. And to monitor this, we have created these KPIs. You can see here now the comparison between IDCC and IDCC. So for the last month, so it's only the summer situation. You see, for example, here for the import direction for France, there is a clear improvement from around 6% to around 2.5%. We have also some improvements for the export direction on the next slides. Here, for example, for the Netherlands, it's improved from 11 to 9%. And on the third slide, you can then find the real isolations. So when neither import nor export is possible. So here, the excess changed a little bit. So it's not 50%, it's not the max value anymore, but 5%. You can see here that overall biddings and isolations are quite low. It's below 3% for all borders. So of course, the reason here is also that we are in the summer, not in the winter. So I can imagine that that looks different when we have also information about the winter, about the upcoming winter. Yes.
Maybe it's also a good moment because we said we would follow up on these effects of bidding zone isolation. We put IDCC live. Like from market parties' perspective, does it make a difference? What's your experience after these first months? Or is it too early to say something about it?
We only feel the reduction of available time for the industry. every time you make another. But this is mainly due to IDAS, not maybe due to.
This one doesn't feed an IDA, yeah, so it's directly updating continuous trading.
On this slide, you can find the overview about the fifth amendment of the IDCC methodology. As you see, it's quite similar to the changes that are proposed in day ahead, and the changes are also aligned. So, for example, the integration of the static interconnector, the removal of LTA inclusion, which could impact the capacities for IDCCA, and the extension of the Polish allocation constraint, as well as the consideration of the 110 kV elements. Which I think is mainly used by Hungary in the end. But there are also some specific intraday topics that will be new in the future. It's the introduction of floor-based and IDAS, which will come in 2027. The don't level coupling, I think we also discussed this morning a little bit about day ahead. So the implementation will be there for day ahead first, but will also be introduced in IDAS later on. And as you can also see here, there are a lot of changes for this. Change are needed in the methodology. So the article then amended because of this. We have the post-go-live studies. The deadlines of post-go-live study have also been a bit shifted. Reason there that we are also partially waiting for the developments in the data capacity calculation. There are similar studies performed for development in the work process. And on the last slide, I think it's just a summary of some smaller corrections and clarifications that are also impacting the methodology itself from verification, but no major points, I would say. Okay, then we come to the next IDCC computation, which is IDCC-D. So after the development of IDCC-D, we are preparing the implementation of IDCC-D. So with IDCC-D, we will update the capacities again here before the IDA3 at 10 o'clock. The preparations are ongoing. We already started an internal parallel run, and actually next week the external parallel run will start. Go live as for Steam in April, so I think it's also around 6 months until this process will go in operation. Yes. The next topic is about the capacity improvement study. We performed a study on TSO side to find and analyze measures that could improve the capacity for intraday. Also to improve the KPI, we just saw the building on isolations. You can find a more detailed result of the study on the ENTSO-E website. We are sharing a link here. So far we concluded on 2 improvements, 2 measures that will be or are already integrated in the IDCC process. So for IDCCA, we will update the ATC extraction parameters a little bit, increase the value of the PVTR threshold from 0.5 to 1%. So this will lead in the future also to bigger capacities. So this implementation was done beginning of August. For IDCC-B, the focus is more on the process and IT optimization. For IDCC-B process, we use a specific grid model, which includes actions that are coordinated among TSOs. And we prefer to use the grid model with more middle actions. But as you know, there are also some time constraints, and we have to provide capacity at around 10 o'clock or before 10 o'clock in the evening. And the IDCT process itself took also some time. So we are a little bit limited because of this regarding our choice of the grid model. Yeah, we were able to improve the timing a little bit, so the computations can run a little faster. So we can use the grid model with more middle actions, which means less congestion and more capacities in the end. To implement this, we are using a two-step approach. Beginning end of October, we will gain 10 additional minutes with a positive impact on the usage of the grid model. And in Q2 2026, we will go live then with the second phase and gain additional 6 minutes, which allows us to use a better forecast as input for the intraday capacity calculation.
In this, do you see any changes then in the publications of the items related to IDCCB? Not only in terms of the prices, but also the other items like the initial PTDF or the stuff like that?
Yes, it could be because it's a different grid model, which is the essential input for the capacity calculation. And if there's, for example, some topology measure used by TFO, then it will have an impact on the PTDF of the NEC. If there are other measures, for example, different PFD settings, video dispatch, and so on, then this will impact the margins that are available.
But in terms of publication time, will that change or will it remain like?
Publication time
will not change.
Not change. We will still publish the final product domain as usual.
Okay.
We can just start our process a little bit later because it's faster in the end. Yes, and next to this, already almost implemented measures. We are also investigating another one, which could have a positive impact on intraday capacities. Already in the capacity improvement study, we investigate a little bit the usage of virtual capacity for the intraday, which is a new topic, and here we're proposing to investigate a little different approach. Basically the minimum for intraday, but this is not the same as we are used to for day ahead because this time this minimum can exclusively be used by the intraday market. So we provide or plan to provide this capacity then on top. This is also the reason why the reference point is not anymore the zero balance situation without any market exchanges, but the situation that we call it RefProc, which is basically all previous market situation. I think it's easier to understand the principle on the next slide. One of the main objectives of this is to really avoid or minimize the pre-congestion and building on isolations by allowing or guaranteeing these additional 5% of MINRAM. You can see it here on the right side. There is the flow-based domain. So each red line represents a NEC. We have the previous market outcome on the RefProc, which is the orange point. And around this orange point, we aim to increase the flow-based domains so that every time we can, or the market can allocate 5% for the intraday. So today we have the situation that there's no margin left for the intraday trading. For example, if there's already congestion in the grid model, and there's then consequently there's also no market trade possible anymore. But with this, market trades would be possible in any direction. Of course, this is up for validation by TFO. So it could endanger the grid security. Of course, and for this situation, we cannot provide virtual capacities for intraday. Additionally, for the methodology, there was also a cap or a cap will be introduced, so that there is kind of a MAC-CT capping or a MAC-CT target that should not be exceeded. So the MAC-CT target, for example, could be the 70%. So this is what you know from day ahead. And there could be situations where we already provide 70% to the day-ahead market, and also the market takes the 70%. And for these situations, we would not offer the additional 5% for the intraday market anymore. So this is then relevant here, for example, in the example for NEC number 5. NEC number 5 is outside of the blue dotted circle, which means that the 70% target is already fulfilled. So this NEC will not be shifted again. But for example, for NEC 2 here, you see that the 70% target as a MAC-CT target is not already fulfilled because it's violating the blue circle. And especially for these situations, this method will then help because the NEC 2 will be then shifted outside of the blue cycle, and additional capacities are created that can be then used by the market.
For different net positions.
For different.
Yes, according to this graph. If you already have given the day-ahead market all available 70% for the trading purposes, and you can't release any more on intraday, how this shift will be held by market participants in exact order?
So here you can see that the NEC 2 is quite close to the orange point, which means there is no or almost no capacity for the opposite of net position B. So let's say the import of net position B. And with this new method, we would shift then the NEC number 2 to the left. And you can also have then more import capacities for the net position of B here in the example.
May I ask, is it possible to move NEC 5?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
In this logic, would it be possible to move NEC 5 to the left upper corner?
NEC 5. Yeah, indeed. So this is also one point of the proposal here of the methodology, that NEC 5 is not moved because NEC 5 already fulfills the MAC-CT target. So NEC 5 is outside of the blue dotted circle. There are already 70% allocated after the day-ahead market, for example. So we will not create more virtual capacities than the 70%. So NEC 5 is not moved here.
And what happens in case of negative RAMs? So when the orange point is not inside the day-ahead domain?
If the orange point is not inside the domain, then of course the first step is to include the orange point and then add the 5%.
So does it mean that you will not get any more negative RAMs in IDCCB?
No, that is. Before validation, it's not possible anymore because the orange point will always be included in the forest.
Oh, okay.
That's really the conceptual idea, that the backup that we start with is incomplete. Even though that we take 10 or 16 more minutes, we know that the security process in reality takes much more hours to be fully complete. That's what we try to offset, this effect that it's incomplete, because that's the effect that leads to zero or negative RAM, by creating some small margin around it. So if today a connect would be there with 15% negative RAM, it should actually mean that we shift it with 20 up to maximum 20% to create 5% of margin. And that's why you understand that we also need to validate this first to see how much feasible that is.
Yeah, maybe to be fully precise, of course, there could be situations with a negative RAM if the MAC-CT target of 70% is fulfilled, because then we won't shift. So there could be still negative RAM in the flow-based domain, but it's less likely.
If the target is fully achieved already, then you can have
For
negative.
example, if the orange point is outside of the blue cycle.
Yeah. But all the connects are outside also, then you can have negative runs. Yes.
But also, kind of special situation. What it could occur. We have no experience with it. We will see it during our analysis.
If you have 70% already in there.
This would happen.
Okay. Okay. And then after validation, so you can still have validations that bring the run below 0?
Indeed. So of course, as a result of the validation, we could reduce the run again due to the IDA application, and then of course the run could also become negative again, as we see today.
And will this approach will be visible already in the initial publication of the PTDF, or will it be something done in between, let's say, the initial computation and the final?
Only in analysis so far, we haven't discussed what information will be published from us, because we are still checking if this is something that can be useful.
Yeah, but for us it's useful then if you can, once you decide. Thank you.
To discuss all the topics that we have.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, this is the study that we are doing, and then depending on the conclusion of the study, there will, yes or no, be a regulatory track to go through, because of course it would require a change in the methodology first before we could implement this.
If there is no question, can we switch to the next slide, or is it okay?
Yeah, can you find the planning for the analysis? So we started, I think we already finished the study computation of flow-based domains, and we are now preparing the individual validation phase, which is the most crucial one, because this phase will determine if this approach is operationally feasible or not. The results of this will then be assessed from November until February. And we plan to finish the whole study in March then. If there's any update, I think we will use the common communication channels.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there any last question before some flank survey taken? So right now we are a bit delayed, so I'm just going to ask before even considering the break, if the presenter on the side of NRAs are okay to start the presentation at 3:30 instead of 3, so we can have a 15-minute break, or should we go forward?
That would be me, and it's fine to reconvene at 3:30 as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, then, thank you. Very good. Thank you very much. So we'll break and be back then at 3:30. Thank you.
I'm gonna do the because I wanted to show the website from ENTSO-E.
So online, welcome back.
Yes, welcome back. And we're a bit fewer in the room right now, but still we have a last topic to discuss, which is the derogation request from the 70% rule. This would be presented by a core NRA. Are you online and ready?
Yes, hi, I'm here.
Perfect, thank you.
So I did see from the agenda that you allocated 30 minutes to this topic. I don't think this will be necessary. It's just a number of slides. Happy to take any questions afterwards, but I don't think I will keep you for 30 minutes just to reassure you. So in any case, thanks for your interest in this topic and thanks for allocating some time to present from the core NRA's perspective, how we intend to proceed with the topic of post-2025 derogation requests. So if you could move to the next slides, I will explain a little bit the context why we are presenting this to you today. So over the last year, over the last years, plural, actually, we have been discussing and implementing and enforcing the 70% rule, the infamous threshold, which is included in the electricity regulation, Article 16, paragraph 8, in combination with the action plans, in combination with the bidding zone review studies, etc. So Articles 14, 15, 16 of the electricity regulation actually deal with the interlinks between all these aspects. And in particular, with regards to Article 15 and Article 16, there's a foreseen increase, or there's an expectation from the regulation that there is a gradual increase since the entry into force of those provisions back in 2020 until the end of this year, with regards to how much capacities are being provided for cross-zonal exchanges. That being said, we have discussed or we have implemented over the last years several aspects related to 70% compliance. So from a regulatory perspective, we have been engaging with our respective TSOs on how to comply with this. We have also been engaging with the member states on how to adopt and to implement action plans. So basically, in a nutshell, the approach is that if you identify structural congestion which cannot be pinpointed to specific operational security concerns, you can apply for an action plan. This has happened in a number of member states over the last couple of years. So in a number of member states between 2020 and the end of this year, action plans have been implemented, have been enforced, in the sense that these have increased the available cross-zonal capacities following a linear trajectory from whatever the starting point was until 70% compliance expected to be achieved by the end of this year. I'm saying expected to be achieved. That is because Article 15 only allows for these action plans to be implemented until the end of this year. And so from the 1st of January 2026 onwards, these can no longer be applied. So that's a clear legal provision. This increase in capacity, this is reflected in increased cross-zonal trade, but also increased possibilities for other TSOs, other member states to provide higher capacities. So we understand, and we also acknowledge to some extent that we have had the same expectations in the past, that these cross-zonal capacities indeed have increased over the last couple of years. We have seen from the monitoring efforts from several individual NRAs, member states, and ACER that indeed capacities have increased, but still over the last year we have discussed and engaged with our TSOs, and we have come to the conclusion from a regulators and from a core TSO's perspective that it is very likely that even with the discontinuation of the action plans, it is possible that after next year, from the 1st of January 2026 onwards, there are still foreseeable grounds for operational security concerns that would impede the core TSOs to guarantee at all times 70% compliance. And for that reason, we have engaged, we have discussed among NRAs with ACER, with the European Commission, the possibility to continue issuing derogations to deal with these operational security concerns. On the one hand, because a lot of the tools that were expected to be available by the 1st of January 2026 or closely after that are not yet available. I'm thinking here about coordinated validation, the regional operational security analysis, cost sharing of remedial actions, investments projects which have been planned to reinforce the grid according to the famous build, split, pay principle. So a number of these topics or a number of these projects are not yet available on the one hand, and on the other hand, we still have the observation that even with, for example, compliance with the 70% criterion in large bidding zones, there are still externalities being generated. For example, loop flows that impede the ability of receiving TSOs to guarantee 70% at all times. So with that in mind, we have requested clarification on the electricity regulations provisions, and we have received or we have come to the conclusion that under specific circumstances, it is still possible that derogations persist after next year. So that is the context. If you move to the next slide, please, let me explain why I included this chart here, because this is quite an important one, and this does not really say something about how to say increases in available capacity or increases in compliance with the minimum capacity requirements. It says something, on the other hand, about ambition levels. It says something about interim targets, and it's taken from ACER's market monitoring report. You can see in the title, so it's an overview of the interim capacity requirements. We still see, despite the fact that we observe progress, despite the fact that we have in general increasing compliance numbers, we still see, if we only look at the core TSOs or at the core bidding zones, that there's a large difference with regards to what the actual targets for compliance are. So if you take 70% as a starting point, then you add to that the action plans which were still enforced in 2024. If you add to that derogations which were granted to TSOs in 2024, you can see here that there are actually 3 member states in the core region where the actual target was 70%. So it's Czech Republic, France, and Slovenia. Those are the countries where no derogations are approved. Those are also the countries where no action plans are in place. There are a number of bidding zones or member states where there's a flat target below 70%. Looking here at Germany and Romania, those are countries which have implemented an action plan. So those are just the values established by the linear trajectory or the linear action plan, which increases year after year. So if you would make the same exercise for 2025, which undoubtedly ACER will do next year, you will see that for Romania and Germany, these will have increased closer towards 70%. But then aside from that, you also have countries where you have derogations, and there's a difference between some countries where the actual interim targets are rather close to the 70% threshold. So looking here at Hungary and Belgium, for example, and there are a couple where it's a bit farther away and where there's a large difference across different market time units or across different network elements to be considered between what is on average the targets and what is the maximum target in a certain given time slot, or what is the minimum target. So looking at Poland, Austria, there's a large difference between the minimum and the maximum value. So There's a large difference with regards to what the targets are, with regards to what the ambition level are, and with regards to how easy or how difficult it is to consider or to achieve compliance with the 70% plus derogations plus action plans requirements. So that being said, in a subsequent step, obviously, is also analyzed actual compliance with these interim targets. There, in general, we see improvements. We see that general most of the time, with some exceptions, these are quite frequently met. Admittedly, very often with virtual capacities, very often with the reliance on the adjustment form in RAM. So it's not physical capacity that is there. It's virtual capacity which is being given to artificially increase the capacities in the day-ahead time frame. Even though, relying on possibly future redispatch or counter trading actions or other remedial actions. So this is important for setting the context, and this is important to determine how we can, as regulators, move forwards, and on which I'll elaborate in the next slides, to, given the current context, given the difficulties, to actually guarantee today already 70% at all times, to still achieve meaningful progress. And so that's why we have started engaging amongst core NRAs, also together with Acer, and we've transmitted some of these messages already to our TSOs on the harmonization of the process. And there are a couple of elements important when we assess the needs for future derogations and when we assess whether or not we will continue to approve these. And so we identify these. This is an exercise that has been done on the initiative of ACM and CREG to try to harmonize this as much as possible and to try to enforce stricter rules with regards to, or in comparison to, what has happened in the last couple of years, in order to still be able to, even though the context does not change, even though the legal provisions do not really change, to still try to take the occasion of trying from next year's onwards to get meaningful progress. And so in order to that, in order to accomplish that, or to try to initiate that, we had a look at the different phases which leads to an approval or not of the derogations. And there are some quite important phases that we established in this process. So first, obviously identifying the need for a derogation and identifying the actual operational security concerns that would hinder or that would result in the fact that TSOs cannot guarantee at all times the 70% requirements. That's an obvious one. So we need to clearly establish that there's a need. We need to clearly establish that these operational security concerns still persist after the 1st of January of next year's onwards. And now we have to consider and think about how, with that in mind, we avoid that the solution that we implement, so the solution being the derogation, avoids undue discrimination. So this is a task for TSOs. This is something that we, from NRA's perspective, try to push our TSOs to consider as much as possible. Then obviously, in order to avoid that, we just established the status quo for the next couple of years. We have to look at what we have done in the past. We have to look at derogations that have been issued in the past and learn from that. We have to really check whether or not the derogations in the past have led to meaningful progress. If we can still expect that from next year's onwards, if we continue with derogation, that there will still be increases in cross-zonal capacities, trying to avoid that we just end up approving for an indefinite amount of time the status quo. So we have to look at historic progress, and we have to see if the solutions that we implemented in the past are still fit for the future. And then the third one, and that's a very important one in light also of the previous slide, so setting clear and transparent requirements, procedures, and dynamic interim targets. And this dynamic interim targets is quite an important one. It's one that has not always been adopted or implemented in the past. So given on the one hand that we no longer have any actions plans with flat targets with a linear trajectory, we want to avoid that that we receive derogation requests or that we approve derogation requests which just provide other flat targets. In theory, it's not it's not impossible to just state in a derogation request that you cannot guarantee the 70% for whatever operational security reason, and then provide an alternative which applies in any case on any network element under any kind of operational security concern for any specific market time unit. We want to avoid that. We want to have dynamic targets which are deterministically calculated through a methodology which can be enforced and which can be recalculated by regulators, by market participants, by whomever, in order to ensure that we end up with a alternative target, so alternative to the 70% target, but as little below 70% as is strictly required by the specific operational security concern which is in place. This is, in our view, the most important means to avoid that we allow for too much discrimination between internal and external exchanges, because obviously if we deviate from the 70% requirement, we are allowing somehow implicitly more discrimination between internal and external exchange. We want to limit that to what is strictly necessary given the operational security concerns in place. This has already been implemented by a number of TSOs, by a number of NRAs over the past, not by all of them, but we want to establish this as a best practice. We want to ensure that these dynamic targets are calculated and implemented and upheld by the NRAs everywhere where derogations will continue to apply. And then finally, we have the monitoring of the compliance ex post. So as you may know, any regulator that is responsible for the TSO in a member state which does not have an action plan is also responsible for monitoring the compliance with the 70% requirement, either with or without the derogation. So here it becomes important that we step up the efforts and that we harmonize the approach to consider whether or not our TSOs are compliant with the legal requirements. I'm stating here, none of these are new requirements, or that's maybe difficult to understand. This relates to the fact that the legal requirements have not changed as far as we're concerned. These are, in our view, just a strict interpretation of existing requirements, which we need to enforce, which we admittedly and in all transparency probably could maybe have not properly, I'm thinking implemented in the past. Now we want to take the occasion to be strict in our messages to the TSOs, but also to the markets, that we will really scrutinize derogations and compliance with 70% on all of these points. And for this purpose, in order for that exercise to be successful, we have taken this initiative from the side of CREG and ACM. I'm happy to say that we have large support on that from all the other core NRAs. So we will be as strict as we can in the adoption of these rules. This is maybe the last bullet is not that relevant for all of you. This was mostly relevant in our discussions among regulators and perhaps also with the TSOs. But as you know, when asking for derogations, when submitting a derogation request, there is a round of NRA consultations, and it is possible that an individual NRA objects or issues a veto to a derogation request issued by another TSO to another regulator. We have agreed that we will try as much as possible to make all of the points above, so in the first 5 bullet points, explicit in our communication when we consult with each other. So for example, when the CREG will consult with the other core NRAs on the future derogation request of ELIA, we will make all of these points explicit. We will explain to our colleague NRAs why we need derogations, what the actual operational security concerns are, how we avoid undue discrimination, what progress we have established in the past, how we consider that the derogation in the future is still the appropriate tool to tackle all the concerns, how we have a deterministic method to establish an interim or a dynamic interim target, how we can verify that, and how we will monitor the compliance ex post. All of these things we will make explicit in our communication to the other NRAs. Other NRAs will also do this with each other, so that we avoid submitting derogation requests to each other which are not fit for purpose and which should not be approved. So that's why we have such a template for communicating with each other, just to make our lives a bit easier and just to avoid that we forget some of these elements when we try to approve them. So that's on the NRA process for the next couple of weeks, months. Maybe I have one final slide, and this might be of interest to you. In the meantime, we have also tried to establish an overview of to which extent in specific bidding zones or specific TSOs will ask for derogations or not. We have issued a questionnaire among NRAs asking them to indicate how likely it is that the derogation request will be received. So here we have the results in the table ranging from yes, definite yes to definite no, likely yes, likely no, and then unknown. So as you can see, in six core bidding zones, Belgium, Romania, Netherlands, Slovakia, Poland, and Austria, we will definitely have derogation requests. Then in Ireland and Hungary, it's still unclear, one leading towards likely yes, one towards likely no. And then we have definite no's for Luxembourg, France, Slovenia, and Czech Republic. There's one unknown, which is Germany, and that is still subject to further discussion among BNetzA and its 4 TSOs. So we will see that in the next couple of weeks. That being said, this is just preliminary information based on the individual discussions between NRAs and their TSOs. We will see in the next couple of weeks if and when we will receive more derogation requests. But so we can at least expect for a couple of them to be there, and we will scrutinize and we will assess them according to the logic that I explained in the previous slide. I pause here for a moment, or at least no, my slides are finalized, so I can finalize here for the moment and take any questions that you have, or any comments from my colleagues are obviously also more than welcome. Please.
I've got just one question, which is so in the RAM, then the limit of the line. So some of them are fixed across the years, some of them are seasonal, some of them are GLR. Is it something that is monitored by the NRA, or is it some because from the market participant perspective, it's a bit we are a bit in the dark. We don't know if the situation can change. What is the root cause? Is it because there's an element of is it a transformer? Is it something? What is the situation? Because it's not just because 70% is 70% of something, and this something can be fixed across the year or can vary across the year. And yeah, you can see.
That's a good question, and there's there's quite an easy answer to that actually. So 70% is according to the Fmax of the line, the maximum thermal capacity. Indeed, you might consider that it's difficult to really assess what that Fmax is. Then again, TSOs are quite transparent about this. So if you look at JAO, so the Joint Allocation Office, on that site, TSOs publish a static grid model, which includes all the elements that are considered in capacity calculation, which also includes for every line, for every transformer, for every PST, how the Fmax is established, either fixed limits, seasonal limits, dynamic limits. So there you can assess in which category the Fmax determination falls. Then even more precisely, if you look at the flow-based parameters, for example, in the core flow-based market coupling, you can look at the publication tool, and on a daily basis, for every specific MTU, the Fmaxes of all the considered network elements are reported. So for every individual critical network element, for every specific MTU, for every specific direction, you can see the megawatt value of the Fmax of that element. So there, actually, you can assess all of that, and you can see to what value the 70% applies. What we also do, for example, from Craig's side, when we monitor the compliance, but that's ex post, obviously. So every year we publish a report on to which extent ELIA complies with the 70% plus derogation requirements. There we make the distinction of showing all the numbers, all the statistics that we calculate with regards to compliance for, on the one hand, internal elements, on the other hand, external or cross-zonal network elements. We also look specifically at our PSTs, our phase shifters. So I know some other regulators do this as well. But this is a choice that we make in for the sake of transparency. So take all of that information together, and you can get quite a good picture of what exactly the 70% applies to. But admittedly, you have to look a bit for it. But all of it is somehow available.
I know it's available. That's why I'm asking. If you look at the digital formula, which is called, so that one is static limit across the year. I understand if you go out of GLR, okay, you need to have the protection which are dynamic. But if you've got a line with protections, you can change the protection during within the year. So my question is, why have some lines seasonal limits? So the timing in the year and actually change the limit does vary between TSOs, but we have some elements where the limit is fixed across the year and some where it is varying. And I'm wondering if that is monitored and we know the root cause. And if it can change, basically. So if you have one line which is static limits, suddenly can move to 2 or 3 limits across the year.
Maybe one of the TSO representatives can answer that question with regards to the technical reasons for why on some on some network elements it's static, on others it's seasonal or dynamic. But what I can say is that that's the issue of moving from an approach with static Fmaxes to a dynamic Fmax determination. This is described within the capacity calculation methodologies, and so. We do try to, as much as possible, to enforce that or to impose towards our TSOs that they should all move as much as possible to an approach with dynamic limit determination, with dynamic line rating. Admittedly, some of these are quite lengthy processes, and this does not happen overnight. But it is one of the requirements of the capacity calculation methodology, which I think imposes the obligation on all the TSOs to study to which extent they can actually implement DLR.
Yeah, I only know that this is work in progress indeed. So some TSOs are more advanced than others. But everyone is working on it. So
it's just that the speed at which is happening is we don't know basically. And there is the most important that's going the binding constraint at the moment is static.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a transport.
No, but fair point. Fair point. Yeah. Okay. Any other?
Yes,
Yeah.
that were.
Maybe if we can move one slide backwards. Yes, on this one. Many thanks, Meister, and to all NRAs for presenting this visual. And maybe just go briefly through numbers of proposals, 1, 2, and 3. Number 1 proposes new interconnectors. I think all of us support this idea, but when we take a look on the 10-year network development plan, we still see national plans. Is there any possibility that NRAs, I wouldn't say force, maybe motivate TSOs in the sake of European stability, grid stability, to build really important power lines? And there are maybe 3 or 4 maximum of them, especially considering this Central Europe, in order to sue these Western and Eastern blocks. Another question regarding number 2. You also proposed advantages of ROCs. We still are awaiting to see those advantages of, let's say, more harmonized actions regarding the preparation works, regarding the some outage maintenance and other works to be more regionally oriented. And number 3, regarding the bidding zone review, are there any obligations regarding the previous agreements about necessity for having bidding zone review? Because all the social welfare plans and attempts fell into water if we don't succeed all these requirements. But in order to have this 70% requirement, perhaps bidding zone review will accelerate all the attempts from partial TSOs, but still struggling. And we also miss number 0, and this is capacity mechanism or capacity remuneration mechanisms that for some member states have been already put into the practice, and they already gave results in system security preservation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be very honest here. It's I think it's difficult from my side to answer all of these questions, but I can maybe provide a very high level answer. Hopefully that suffices, and if not, we can perhaps take a bunch of those questions offline as well. But essentially, many of the things that you propose are interlinked and try to address to a certain extent the same problem, but from a different perspective. And the electricity regulation actually acknowledged that different perspectives exist to tackle the issue of slower market integration and to improve the how to say, or to unify the national markets into one big single day-ahead and intraday markets. We have elements linked to quite medium-term solutions. The bidding zone review, for example, if you observe structural congestion, you should assess that. You should consider alternatives such as splitting large bidding zones, merging smaller ones. I don't know. That's one part. You also have, indeed, as you rightly mentioned, investments in additional interconnectors, not just interconnectors, also internal fortifications of the network. That's quite a long-term and a very costly solution. But it's also one of the options. Then you have paying for congestions, so remedial actions, redispatch, counter-trade, those kinds of elements. All of these 3 work together on different time frames, with according to the build split pay principle. So build being network investment, splits being bidding zone reconfiguration, and pay being redispatch and counter trades to ensure higher capacities. But what we are doing here today is to try to ensure 70% compliance, is try to ensure that given the current context, given what is currently available to us, optimizing as much as possible how we use internal and cross-zonal capacities, how we take what we have and try to optimize the way in which we calculate cross-zonal capacity so that we are as efficient as possible in using the existing assets to foster market integration. And that's a bit the key message here. All of these elements are important, but this is just one angle of a much larger puzzle, which is formed by all the different articles in the electricity regulations, so Article 13, 14, 15, 16, etc. Yeah, that I know that might not be very helpful in terms of giving a specific answer to your question, but it just explains a bit that the context is actually very broad and there are a lot of pieces to that puzzle.
Yes, I fully agree with you. Sometimes looking at one puzzle, individual puzzles, we lost the overall picture of the whole mosaic.
Yeah.
And we are still waiting for Godot, if you remember that book. We as market participants need to pay every day congestion cost. And we still just listen to stories, be cautious, things will get better. Every war in the recent 200 years lasted for 4 years. And we have been waiting for more than 7 years.
Thank you for the statements and questions as well. Is there any other points in the room or online or questions on that topic? Yes? No? No.
No.
Okay, then leave you the floor.
Then we are to the last.
So one question for Nico, actually, from the topic before the break.
Yeah, I saw that in the minutes, or I was just dialing in, but I didn't want to disturb you, so please, I saw that you had a question indeed. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, so we were discussing regarding the 20% minimum that we have in the capacity calculation methodology for day ahead. And the question was, are there any public KPI statistics available with respect to which TSOs go below the 20% and how often it happens? And I believe, Nico, that you have been making this type of statistics. I don't know if it's up to date and where it can be publicly found, but maybe you can clarify this.
I think so. The last time we did it was in the monitoring report of 2023. Unfortunately, we did not repeat the exercise for 2024. You can say unfortunately or fortunately. It's actually fortunately because we see that it happens much less often. Not to say hardly ever. So we did observe in 2022, 2023 that this was quite frequent and quite specific to a couple of individual TSOs. Yeah, so we saw that this improved and we stopped publishing this in our CREG reports. So yeah. I don't have any recent numbers on that. Yeah, but that's good news. I mean, or for the proper reason, for good reasons. So.
Is there a need for an action point to ask the core NRAs to come back with this data on 2024 on these statistics? Like, is it easily available? If you would ask the question, Nico, to have this statistic for 24?
Yeah, you feel free to assign an action point for me on that. It's not a very very big ask. So if you want and if that's of interest to you, I can provide the table. Yeah.
I think indeed that would be, I see people giving appreciating nods to that.
Okay.
So thanks a lot.
I cannot comment on the timing because I would have to, I mean, obviously I will have to present it to my colleague and arrays before sharing it. But in any case, happy to do it. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, then we are in the final point of the agenda, the AOB, and during the talks around the meeting, we discussed that actually a lot of information that is available is not known to a lot of parties. So, and here we wanted to highlight again the core section on the ENTSO-E website. And just give you a short tour there. So if you go to the ENTSO-E website and go to regions, you can go to CCR Core. And in this page, you see on top of on the last line, you see different categories. So it's general information about Core, who's in there, what it means. Then meetings and events. There you can find actually all the material from the core consultative groups. So also from the past, also recordings. And if you go to the core processes explained part, then and if you can see the explanation of the active methodologies that have been implemented and are operational. So if you, for instance, Intraday has just been updated with the latest go live. And if you scroll down, you see here also a description of the whole chain and what happens at what points. So yeah, you can actually get a grasp of what it means, what the details are of these processes. And then if you go up again, Brent, we have the core legal framework. Here we have all the methodologies. Here we have still some work to do, and the work we want to do here is to highlight the active documents. So the last, the valid documents. So this is all the history, but it is also good to get out what is at this moment in time valid. So that's still work in progress. We have the news part. So this is all the messages we bring out around core. So this is not operational messages, but more the messages about consultations, about this consultative group, these kind of things. And also very important, the acronyms part, where we have the acronyms spelled out.
Actually, one addition, because I pasted it also in the chat, but you could even show it from the Java publication tool. We actually do publish these statistics on the 20%. So if you, not the daily publication, but it's on the Java webpage. So if you Google Java quarterly report, or you just click on the link that I posted in the chat.
Yeah.
Yes, there you go down. So since the go live, and it's a regulatory obligation part of the methodology, we publish quarterly reports. So if you open the zip file, you will find in there a reading guide of how to read the different Excel files that are in it. And one of the Excel files is called reduction statistics. And in the Excel file, you have tables where it says per TSO, how many times, for how many MTUs, there was a CNEC having around below 20%.
The same 20% in the same format than the floor that was proposed earlier.
So this is the current rule. So it's 20% at the very end. So it means that what actually comes out in the final flow-based domain.
Run over Fmax.
Yeah, yeah. And so when it goes below 20%, it's because you have some LTN effect inside. Normally, you will see, but then you need to open it here. So, so we have here allocation constraints, methods for reductions. There is a ton of information in there. Probably so far not been consulted too much, but I think a lot of the questions that have been raised throughout the session today, you will find a lot of answers there. And then if you open reduction statistics, yes, so that's the one you have number 3, correct one open. You see there columns D and E, the number of CNECs and number of MTUs having CNECs with RAM below 20%. The 3 megawatt is for some rounding effect. And here you can understand you have Croatian CNECs and Slovenian CNECs because they, with the PTR, used a part of this 20%. And that is what in the new amendment is being proposed to, on top of the LTN, gives 20%. This will actually be a net improvement in that respect.
Regarding those PTRs, we have skipped those slides. What are the recent years on that specific border? Are they being removed or are they being preserved?
So there is no track ongoing to change the PTRs on that border now. Is this new information? These quarterly reports to you? Yeah. Yeah, it's good that we explain.
Yeah. Maybe we should also put the slide with all the links in the appendix consequently. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Then about the planning of the. Did we include this slide as well? Because I didn't see it. Okay, yeah. Now, indeed, the planning for next year, we're still, struggling with that, but also we need to adjust it, of course, to the progress in the different work streams. So, Zeli, I propose that we align in the coming weeks to fix again at least two. Consultative groups for next year. We will have also at least one physical. And then of course, if there's need for an ad hoc one, like we had also this year on Intraday, for instance, then we will plan it on the fly. So, but these dates for next year will be published. Will be published before the end of the year. Then, everybody, thank you very much for coming. It is, I think it was, again, very worthwhile to have people in the room and sit and also be able to talk during the coffee breaks and during lunch, and also in the small dinner we had the evening before with some people. So, thank you very much for taking the effort to come here, and people online to, obviously, it's always a bit more difficult in a hybrid meeting than it is in a purely online meeting. But I hope you could get most of the discussions. And then I wish everybody here a good trip back, and everybody online a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
question on that.
Okay, there's a question? Okay, yeah. Alexandra, yeah, please.
Yes,
Okay.
No, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Bye.